Hey, what's going on out there? It's Doug Cunnington here. We're going to talk about site speed and some core web vitals. It's a hot topic these days. I'm going to show you a couple ways that you can test and actually be able to figure this shit out. While that said, I'm still trying to figure it out myself in some capacities, but my site loads pretty fast, so we're going to talk about it today. Now, one cool thing that I have going on, I actually moved a camera, so now we have a Georgie cam, which is maybe the most exciting thing going on right now. So check that out. She's licking her paw. And Georgie, are you doing good? You're a good girl. Yeah, you're live. You're live now. That's right. That's right. And oh, I guess we can do side by side. Hey, girl, you're a good dog. All right. So just playing around with the technology here, and Georgie is. Oh wow. All right. It takes a couple minutes for people to load in here, so it's all right that I'm burning time here. All right, we have Raj in the chat. We have Teos, and all right, Daniel, what's going on? Daniel used to live in Broomfield. Yeah, and that's just down the road here. So, yeah, Colorado's great. Oh, I forgot to turn on the lights behind me. So, we're going to talk about a few of these items today. And I'm curious, let me know in the chat, or if you're watching the replay, what your normal Google PSI, that's the page speed insight score, is, and let me know like what your average load time is. And I'm going to show you a couple of the tools to use here. One of the other things with this whole core web vitals is when we run the tests, we get sort of a snapshot, but it's not real user data. And that's where the core web vitals over on your search console will actually reflect real user data, which can be and is probably different than your like lab results, where you go to one of these tools and you try to see how it reacts. Now, of course, we could use those tools and be effective, but at the same time, it's not real life. It's not real data from out there in the field. Field data is what they call it. So we will talk about a few things, and there's many opportunities for me to plug different services and products and stuff like that. I'm going to generally keep it minimal. I'm fairly agnostic to most of these things. Like hosting, I don't really care. Um, there's so many different companies. You just need the right hosting package for the amount of traffic that you get, and you need resources for whatever it is you're trying to run. So if you have like a huge membership site and there's some specific software that you need to run, then maybe you need more CPU cores, right? You need more processors, more memory to run all that. And then I see Amal is asking if NitroPack works. Again, another situation. There are a number of different caching plugins that you can use, and I bet they all work fine. Now, I haven't tested them all. I haven't used NitroPack. I know some people that do. Some people love WP Rocket. Some people there's tons of them. Again, I'm agnostic. I don't care which one you use. I could sign up to be an affiliate for several of these, and I haven't, right? So if I sign up and I start promoting a specific one because I'm an affiliate, which I do in other areas, but in these cases, these are commodities, right? Who really cares which plugin you're using? If you're on certain hosting companies, they will have a caching plugin that's sort of optimized for their server, the stuff that they're running, and it's typically going to be included, right? So the two main hosting companies that I use, SiteGround, MDD Hosting, they both have their own caching solutions included. So you could just turn it on. It's push button situation, especially with SiteGround, is super easy to do. So Amal, does NitroPack work? Maybe, probably. I don't know. And it probably doesn't matter which caching plugin you use. Daniel and, not Daniel, sorry, Adrian. Adrian and David, thanks to those guys who are moderators out there. So I'm gonna I forgot to turn on the lights back here, so I'm gonna swap over to the Georgie Cam real quick. I know it's gonna take a second for us to get rolling. More and more people are hopping on, and then we'll get into some of the details. So over on the Georgie Cam here. It's cool though. Just stay there. All right, not bad. It adds a little depth. Adds a little depth. So let me know now that we have a few more people in the chat what your normal load times are. Is anyone struggling with the Core Web Vitals? And Teos says, I'm in the 80s, but without ads. This is my problem, and I fear to place ads. I do have a CDM, Ezoic Leap, a fast theme, but maybe you need a web developer. You have a menu created by Elementor, but I'll remove it. It only speeds up the site 3 to 4 units, not a lot. Gotcha. So one of the areas that we should probably talk about here is just like how to test this and get some sort of a baseline of what your site is doing. So one thing before I show you some of the testing options is you probably shouldn't base everything on your homepage, for example. So if you go to, an average homepage, it's probably going to be a lot different than where most of the traffic is going on your site, which could be a blog post or a page or whatever. But on your post that you may get most of your traffic, potentially you're going to have more images. Maybe you have ads running. Maybe you have some sort of a pop-up piece of JavaScript running, and there's some other things going on versus the home page. So if you test your home page, it may load really fast, and then all the pages that get most of the traffic are not that fast. So it's important to test the pages that actually get traffic. So I would recommend, pick your most trafficked page, right? So that'll give you a better impression of what's really going on. So let's look at how to test this stuff, and then I'll mention another sort of mini disclaimer. So I probably won't be able to help you solve your specific issue on the live stream, but everyone's site is a little bit different. So I'm struggling with the LCP, the largest contentful paint, on Niche Site Project. Now, I don't think I'm actually struggling with it. I think maybe the Core Web Vitals testing mechanism is screwed up, and I'll explain that. But the point is, you're probably going to have to go and run some tests, review where your site is getting hung up, and then fix things one by one. So I've figured out hosting already. Now I'm on a sufficient hosting package for any of my sites. So I have fast server response time. I don't have a lot of plugins. I've already reduced those, so I don't have any issues there. So I've like narrowed things down, and you'll have to go one by one. So if you're running specific software, specific plugin for whatever reason, you may have to review that and figure out, okay, do I really need this plugin? Or maybe you identify a plugin that you do need, but it loads slow, or there's some crappy code in there, and there's a faster, better solution. So you may have to go and investigate that. Or maybe you're using a lot of plugins for formatting and some front-end display things, which is pretty much unnecessary. You should be able to code that, or you can hire a developer to code that for you. So there's a few things that we will get into. All right, so first, let's look at how you test this stuff. So if I configured this right, we should be able to share my screen. So this is, of course, the Google Page Speed Insight. And this is kind of the default place that you would probably want to test. It's on a Google site. So if you're trying to make Google happy, you may as well test there. Now you'll notice that I have my homepage here, and I just told you, hey, don't do your homepage, pick something else so you get a real picture of what's going on. So I'm actually going to hop over and find some other blog post to have a look at. So let's go over here and let's see how to reduce server response time. And by the way, there are links here in the show notes and the description so that you can have a look at some of the stuff that we're reviewing. So we'll just test this real time and we'll kind of go over some of the information here. The other place is GT metrics, and I think a lot of people seem to like GT metrics a little bit better, and it seems to be providing more real information here. So I also like Pingdom, so we'll go ahead and test it here and slam my server and see how it does when we're testing all at once. So these are all rolling in parallel. Again, links in the description. These are the tools that I use to have a look and see how my site is rolling. See how fast it's loading and all that stuff. So I think this is where we're testing it. So here's the deal, right? So we're scoring a 96. That's good. We're green. You're over 90. You're in good shape. We have this field data, and it says Chrome user experience. We don't have enough real world data for this page, so that's unfortunate. And they do say over the 28-day collection period, we aggregate all the pages served from this origin, does not pass the core web vitals, blah, blah, blah. So as we scroll down, we see, mostly green, everything's not perfect. And we have the first contentful paint. And the largest contentful paint is the one that I'm ending up struggling with a lot of the time. Or at least that's what's reported over on the Search Console. When you test it like this, well, everything looks pretty much fine. And one of the sort of key things, you can scroll down and see the opportunities. So we don't have many opportunities. Like I said, I've sort of optimized things pretty well. You can, however, look a little closer and kind of investigate things. So there's the past audits, we have the diagnostics, and one thing, so like I said, the LCP is something I struggle with. And what you could do is just click through this page and there's resources on these things that we never heard of before, right? I never paid attention to this before. So this is the largest contentful element painted within the viewport, and I can learn more. And for me, it's the title, and it's just a regular font here. So if you click on learn more, you'll be able to have a look and learn all about it. And that's the case for every one of these items. So if you don't know what the hell they're talking about, that's okay. You can go investigate and learn a little bit more, and hopefully it will clear it up. It might not, you might have to go and do more research, but at least it'll give you sort of the default information. And like I said, it's like that for everything here. And most of these things with the past audits, this is something that is taken care of with the caching plugin that I use. And this one is like the light speed caching, because MDD hosting uses the Lightspeed web server. So this minifying JavaScript and CSS and defer off-screen images and using lazy load, it's all in that plugin. All I have to do is click the check boxes and it's good to go. So there are a few things, right? So here I have some unused JavaScript, and we're talking about 23 kilobytes. So not really that much, but it is a little bit. And frankly, I don't know what that is. So it's loaded from my CDN over here, but I don't know what it's associated with. So as you go through, you can identify these little pieces along the way. Now, I see there's a lot of chat going on, and I'll come back in a second. Some people are commenting on GT metrics, which we'll be able to have a look at. So here we're looking at the same page. We see it's 100% performance. It has an A. The largest contentful paint is 386 milliseconds. So, I mean, things are good here, and some people are commenting on the waterfall, which is really helpful to see so you know what's going on and like where you're hung up. So this is obviously very small, but you kind of get the idea what's going on. It's actually smaller than it should be. So here, one of the big things is the server response time here, and it's at 217 milliseconds is what it says. And this will vary, and I can't remember the exact metric, but I think it's under 250 milliseconds is what you're looking for. So this is like a tad long, but everything all together here, the whole page loads in 9 requests. It is 117.5 kilobytes and then 450 milliseconds. So that's pretty good. And then when we hop over here, so maybe some of that data was a bit off with the page size, because here we see over on Pingdom, same page, 256K, and then 510 milliseconds, 16 requests. But it's in the same ballpark. And I can tell you when I have used other tools and basically had a lot more on my website, I would have 130 requests and the page size would be, 2 megabytes, and the load time would be, 6 seconds or something like that. So over time, I've reduced things and realized I don't need that JavaScript thing, that's loading on another site. It's just going to take up, more load time. So we also, typically you would see the waterfall here, but we don't in this specific case, and I have no clue why. So I do have several images on this page. Let me run this again. But I do have several images on the page, and that's probably one of the biggest areas that people make a mistake, because you have huge images, like the wrong resolution, and you can reduce the size of the image, and then you can compress it as well. So that's one of the big things you can do. All right, so these are the areas where you can test, and I'm going to hop back over to the chat so that we can look at what other people are saying. There's some good discussion over there, so let me pop back full screen. Okay. Chris says, can I watch it later? Sure. All the live streams become YouTube videos. In fact, you can watch it, you can like rewind and rewatch it live. Okay. Peter says that you removed ads and now you're in the 90s for mobile and the desktop, and the Core Web Vitals still says it's not good and the CMS is the problem. Okay, and Ramesh says he's struggling with the LCP and CLS. So Peter says, I think I'll stop worrying about it, and the page loads fast, but the CLS is never good enough. Maybe it's the hosting. Yeah, and Peter, this is like a similar struggle. I've heard someone recently talk about the FID. I'm struggling with the LCP, but as we saw from a couple tests, my site loads fast when you test various different things. I've looked at pages that have a lot of images, some embedded YouTube videos, several things to slow the site down, and it still loads pretty fast. So when I peel back, what the actual intent of Google, other than taking over the world and that sort of thing, but in this case, they're trying to have a good user experience. My site has a good user experience. Does an end user give a fuck about the LCP? No, they don't know what it is. They just want to make sure that they can read the content there. They really don't give a shit about all these little details. They just want it to load fast. And for that, my site loads fast. I'm pretty happy with it. So I am in a spot where I'm like trying to optimize the last, 1%, just so when I go into Search Console, Google shows me that everything's 100%. But, what can we do? The testing mechanism that Google is using might be off a little bit. And I don't know. I don't know. So if I can solve it easily, I will. All right, Adrian says, a little tip: if you create a free account with GT Metrics, you could change the default location, which is Canada. So good tip there. All right, and Terraqual, so very popular question. Does KGR still work? It does. Do I know if anyone is using it? Yes. Just watch the success story interviews and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's no update. It's been kind of alarming that it's held up, right? It's a simple concept and it's held up over the years here. All right, and Peter says, for me, the opportunity is reduce the server response time. Is that up to web hosting? All right, great question. Peter, yes, generally that's going to be the hosting. And there are a few places you can go online and check the server response time for different hosting companies or your specific server. So a simple search will point you in the right direction. You could put in your domain and then it'll tell you the server response time. So that said, the server response time can be impacted by several different areas too. So the server response time, I think, can change if you have, let's say you have 20 plugins running, and if you reduce it down to only the critical ones, you might see that your server runs a little faster because there's not other stuff running. And we could think of this like our normal machines or laptops, right? So if we have Chrome open and there's like 15 tabs open, and then you have like a video playing somewhere else and 5 other apps running, and you're trying to render a video, you're probably going to run into issues. So if you try to click over to another window, it's going to take a second because you've bogged down your computer. It's running too much software and you don't have enough memory. You don't have enough processor power. So you can potentially get rid of some of the things that are running and improve, right? So Peter, another thing, right? If you have a hosting package and you have one website on there, great. You may have 5 websites on the same hosting package. It's all running on the same server. So you, in this case, now have 5 instances of WordPress, and each instance takes up more processing power and memory. So this is a thing that you may not realize that it's going to cause an issue, especially when you have unlimited hosting and you can put, several domains on that site or on that server, and you'll end up in a situation where you have even more of your resources taken up by the various websites. So check that out. I've actually given that advice to a few people, and they went over to SiteGround and they said, oh, it's loading slow. I don't know what's going on. Turns out they had 6 sites hosted. Even if they don't get any traffic, you're still running a whole CMS, and WordPress is I would say, fairly inefficient piece of software, right? You have all the content, you got the database, it's dynamically running versus if you just had a flat file system, which I actually looked into a little bit. It seems like I don't know, it's a little more involved, but you can get by and it'll load very fast because it's just a static piece of HTML with some CSS laying on top, and it's fine. You could use templates and basically have all the same functionality. It's SEO, it's fine, like everything is fine, and it's much simpler, and you basically just have like a flat file system and you just load those HTML files. So anyway, Peter, if you have other things running, then you can probably get rid of some of those. especially plugins, right? So a lot of times people will have plugins that are really just unnecessary. They don't need the plugins. They want it to do one little thing, and technically they can use something else. All right. So a couple other questions here. How can we optimize images in the website? So number one, you can make sure you're uploading the right resolution. So if you're uploading huge images and you only need 1,000 pixel width, make sure that you change them. And then you could also compress them. So there are some plugins that will do this on your web server, but if you listen to the last section there where I talked about not running things on your server that you don't need to, it falls into that classification. So I would not have a plugin or anything that runs on your web server compressing images. Look at it this way. Does your web server need to compress those images? The answer is no. They should be compressed somewhere else. You can do it on your local machine. There are some tools. I think there's one called iloveimg.com, and you can basically like upload your images. You can resize them however you want, and then you can download them and then compress them as well. So make sure the resolution is correct, and then you can compress them. There are the like modern or advanced image formats, and I haven't gone that route. Whenever I've tried to use them, it's like fucked things up and the images wouldn't work and wouldn't load. So it doesn't seem to have a like universal acceptance yet, although some people really seem to like those like advanced, I don't even know what they're called. It's like the modern image format or something like that. So, all right. As far as compressing, the images are already on your website. There are some services that can do it. I have tested a little bit. Speaking of the Lightspeed caching plugin, which is included at MDD hosting, and that's where the site niche site project is hosted, by the way. So you can buy credits, and I know there's different companies and services that do this, but you can buy credits and they will get your image. I think they move it to another server and they compress it and they send it back, and then you have a compressed image. So that is what you would need to do for compressing images that are already on your site. As far as changing the size, I'm not sure of a tool that will do that, but I suspect that is just saying it out loud. It sounds like a fairly straightforward problem to solve programmatically. So I don't think it would be a stretch to find a plugin that does that. All right, Solomon says, I was using SiteGround, but then I downgraded because I couldn't manage it and it was expensive. My site can't rank anymore. Okay, that's a bummer. But that said, yeah, if you want to have a fast loading site, you will probably have to pay for it most of the time. Okay, Peter does say, I have 4 domains. You deleted all the unnecessary plugins and you're at 6 or 7. I would say 10 or less and you're probably in good shape. And I have a couple sites where I have like maybe 14, but several of them are not used on the front end, and it's like security and backup and a couple other things like that. So I would say if you're around 10, you're in good shape. You have 4 domains on that hosting package. So that could be something to look at. I am not sure how you would test that, to be honest with you, because I'm like, oh, maybe if you got rid of 3 of them, then the one with the most traffic would load faster. I'm not sure how you could test that in an easy way. I don't know if there's a way you could just like shut those down or turn off the databases without destroying everything. Aditya says, what's my view on AMP in 2021? That's a good question here. So AMP is the accelerated mobile pages, and I never paid attention to AMP when it was really important back then through now. I've never done anything with AMP, and it seemed largely like a waste of time. So I would say it's been dead for a while, and I never paid attention to it anyway. All right, and next, Peter mentions Canva Pro. I use Canva, and funny enough, I use the free version, but I was thinking about using the Pro coming up. I've signed up for Pro for a little while, but I mostly can get by. All right. Afnan says, off topic, I submitted a sitemap for a new website, but the coverage tab on the Search Console isn't showing anything. Am I supposed to wait, or is there some way to fix it? The sitemap status is success, so I'm not sure what's up. Yeah, I don't know either. I would potentially try to resubmit it. Take a look at the sitemap, make sure there's stuff on there like you would expect. And if it's a brand new site, I'm thinking of the coverage tab. Yeah, you may have to investigate further. So I'm not 100% sure the answer on that one. But if it's brand new, you may have to wait a little while. Okay. And Chris says that I think maybe AMP is on the way out. So I tend to agree. To my knowledge, no one has really been paying attention to it anyway. I think it was kind of a specific use case for a time. And I typically, as I said, my site loads pretty fast. It has for a while. So I kind of looked at, does my site look fine on mobile? Is it responsive? Does it load pretty fast? Is the experience good? And then I ended up, just moving forward with it. It seems like it's fine, and I just ignored AMP altogether. So, all right, quick note. Someone mentioned Leap earlier, and I got to thank a sponsor, and that's Ezoic, and they have their new tool. It's Leap. It helps your site load faster, gets you green and all those core web vitals. It's free if you're using Ezoic for monetization. So have a look over there. And I've been working with Ezoic for, well over a year at this point. They're great partners. So if you haven't checked them out, please do. Even if you've solved all the loading problems, it's worth having a look. They have a great blog and lots of data, lots of industry data over there. They have a lot of users, so they're able to do that. So thanks to Ezoic, really appreciate it. And then I also have a featured domain to talk about, which I have a little clip to roll. So let's get to that one. Here's a quick word from our sponsor, ODYS Global. They're the source for age domains with strong backlinks and excellent branding. Today, we're going to look at a specific domain. I do want to let you know that you can join ODYS, ODYS.global, using my link. It's an affiliate link, so if you end up buying something, I'd get a commission, which I greatly appreciate. But the thing is, you can get $100 into your account, so there's no reason not to, give it a shot. So in this case, we're going to look at a specific domain featured for today. So this one is cultivatewines.com. And this is a pretty old domain. It's 11 years old. And it was actually an old wine label, essentially. So they were going to promote their own Cultivate wines out of the US. So I guess they're from the West Coast area. And it had articles and galleries related to wine events, as well as some simple recipes to pair with your favorite wine. So it's in the food and beverage and alcohol area. Domain rating of 20, domain authority of 33, at least the last time I checked. And it's a very brandable domain. I think you can set it up as an affiliate site for home brewing and wine in general. There's also people that make wine at home, vintners, winemakers, but a lot of people that ferment things, they ferment beer, wine, cider, whatever. So anyway, this is a pretty awesome domain as far as the things that you can cover. Very similar to homebrewing beer. Home brewing or wine making is, people are obsessed. They spend a lot of money on it. So there are kits, there's various products that you need to use to make wine at home. So you could review all that stuff. Additionally, there are courses and different affiliate programs that are not physical products, so digital products that you can refer people to as well. So that said, there's plenty of room to, promote products in general, but there's tons of informational content as well. So there's a lot of how-to stuff and different things that you can teach people or at least cover that information. So lots of topics. Of course, if you end up going the informational route, which I think you should probably have informational and affiliate review content, but the informational you could put ads on. Now, that said, let's look at some of the power behind this domain. So we're going to hop over to Ahrefs. So we see cultivatewines.com. Domain rating of 20. It has 196 referring domains. We can see that right here. And then we can also see that there are 165 do follow domains. So I typically look at the number of referring domains, and the do follow are the ones that matter the most. So with that said, let's look at some of the referring domains. So we have Wikipedia, Vimeo, Scientific America. So these are all of them. Of course, Wikipedia is not a followed link, but we can just filter here and we can see Mercury News, brownpapertickets.com, Architectural Digest, Parade, Fordham EDU, Orange.com, CookingLight.com, Independent, Tasting Table, Nashville Scene, and so on. The point being, there are a lot of awesome links. So I would speculate, if you want to get into the wine space or somehow in the alcohol or beverage area, of course you can just run with this. If you have a food blog already, I would speculate that you potentially could put together a silo or a section of your website, a cluster of content around food, beverages, and alcohol, really. So if you had that section, you could redirect this specific age domain to that cluster of content. And really, it's like an acquisition. It's a great way to look at it. So anyway, if you're interested in this domain, maybe you have a food blog or something, this could be a great way to branch out into the wine, beverage, and alcohol area, for example. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, there have been several homebrew topics in the domains that we've featured from ODYS. So you could put together a little acquisition package where you're getting a section or a domain on wine, you're getting a domain on home brewing beer, and then you're kind of putting them together into one more powerful domain. So just a thought. And thanks again to ODYS Global. Let's get back to the show. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about site speed. I'll do a quick recap and then we'll talk about the new thing. So think about how to get a baseline. So you have to test your site. So sure, you have some data on Search Console, but use GTmetrix, use Pingdom, use the PSI tool, and see where you're getting hung up. You will have to review the data, and I would prioritize it based on the amount of time that each little step takes up. And as we saw before, with some of the tools, you have basically a waterfall view so that you can see what's going on. So this is a great example because it loads so fast here. But if you had multiple calls to different domains, for example, then you would maybe have to trace things down and realize, like I did, that opt-in monster was making my site load so much slower, and it was making what I believe to be a bunch of unnecessary calls. So I took it off, and it's been fine, and my site loads much faster, and I'm saving about $600 a year or something like that, $500-600 a year. So I'm saving money, my site loads faster, and I don't have to manage, an extra tool out there. And there were a couple instances of that. I've just needed to trim down over time. So once you have that baseline, you will just have to knock things out. And I told you before, I don't really care what hosting you use. There's a couple companies that I use, but really, most any hosting company is probably going to be fine. You do need to make sure that you have the appropriate hosting package for your site based on the traffic and what you're trying to do. So if you don't have enough memory, talk to the hosting company. You can probably upgrade on an ad hoc basis. That's what I'm able to do. In fact, some hosting companies let you get sort of real-time resources. So if you hit a certain level of, say, CPU usage, then you can add an extra core on there. So why would that be useful? Let's say you're in the retail season and you hit Black Friday and all of a sudden you get a lot more traffic. Well, then you can have a real-time extra processor added to your server so that all of a sudden you've added 50% more capacity on your site, and it still loads fast, and it really is like real time. So it hits that level, whatever threshold it is, and then you'll be able to get more servers automatically, more CPU core automatically allocated, more memory, whatever it is that you have on your hosting package. So make sure you don't have too many plugins, only the essentials. And the last thing I'll mention as we're starting to close it out is your theme. So we're assuming WordPress. A lot of us are using WordPress out there, but it could be, some other CMS. And I assume there are good implementations of themes and there are bad ones. And one of my biggest gripes, which I'll try not to go on a rant here, but it's just the page builders. So there are great things that you can do with page builders. They have tons of capabilities, and if you come from a design background and you care very much about what your site looks like and the branding and all those little details, I don't care much about. You go look at Niche Site Project. It's fairly simple. There's some ugly stuff, but the content's up front, and I'm not trying to win any design awards, and I won't. But the interesting thing with the page builders is they'll say, oh, it's great for a blog or a business site, or if you have a membership site or this other thing, and it's trying to do everything, and they include all the functionality and all the options that you might need in the future. But it turns out you probably don't need all of that. You probably only need a couple little things. So that's why I've opted for more minimal type WordPress themes. So I use the Focus WordPress theme primarily. I have that on most of my sites. And then I also use Carbonate, which is also a minimalist type theme, but you do need to have the comfort to get into the code a little bit. Now, you don't have to do any crazy coding, but if you want to, say, change the color of the sort of feature color of your site, or if you want to change the font, or you want to change the width of the content, you'll have to go in and see the code and then just change a number, font size, a little larger, a little smaller. You may have to change the color from red to green or whatever, but it's fairly straightforward, but you do have to touch code. The great thing with both the with the Focus WordPress theme and then Carbonate is they are minimal. They are generally set up with one column of content. They are by default white background, some black text. I mean, it's kind of the classic look that you would want to see. They are both great platforms to build upon, so they would be fine regardless of what you are trying to build. The big thing, right? So if you're thinking to yourself, oh, why don't I get the page builder so I can do everything that I need to do? Well, then you end up with a lot of bloated code and potentially a bad implementation. So you have to strip away all the things that you don't need, which is probably possible, but you could end up having a huge, well, you're probably going to waste time trying to strip away the code, and you would probably need to know how to do that. You could break things by doing that. With Focus and Carbonate, in either case, you have a solid foundation that's fast and it's very minimal. And if you need to add more stuff, you can. You don't have to take anything away, but you can add the little pieces that you need here and there, which is, I think, a better way to go than to get the all-encompassing Swiss Army knife that does basically everything kind of poorly, and you will have to strip everything away. So can you use Elementor? Can you use some of these others? Sure, you can. You could use Thrive. I still have friends that swear by Thrive and they love it. And I, for the life of me, have no clue how they can still be using Thrive or continue to recommend it. So have a look at your theme. It's probably, unless you have a really shitty theme, it's probably not going to make a huge difference. And then one side note with some of the page builders, specifically, I know like when I used Thrive personally, there were a lot of short codes and a lot of things in the code that were, well, not useful. One, it didn't, I would have like a simple page and it would be a huge file. I don't know why there's just all this extra formatting in there. But one of the issues with some of these themes that have all the page builder aspects, there's a lot of short codes and there's a lot of code that's in there that is really hard to get rid of if you want to migrate to another theme. So when I wanted to stop using the Thrive architect, it was extremely difficult to just take the content and move it into a WordPress post because there was all this garbage in there. So yes, absolutely possible, but it took far more work than it should have. So you're kind of roped in because the migration to move away from some of the tools is so painful that you would rather just stick with the inferior theme than move to a better one, which I did for a very long time. And then eventually, luckily, I got off of there, started using the Focus WordPress theme. So as a little bit of a wrap up, I would say you're probably in good shape if you're not the slowest site in your niche. So have a look on the SERPs and kind of get an idea where your competitors are. You may be in a space, let's say you have a food blog with recipes. There's a good chance a lot of the sites have lots of ads. They have a lot of little videos, and it's a just abysmal user experience, but it's probably okay. It's probably going to be okay if your site is just a little bit faster than the others. Now, if you can blow them out of the water and have a fast loading site, go for it. That's going to be, ideal. But I was chatting with my buddy Matt the other day, talking about site speed, and he thought, oh, Core Web Vitals is going to be a huge update. I think it's going to be massive. And I really don't think there's going to be a huge shakeup in the SERPs. And I think, Matt and I may be splitting hairs. We did an interview, so I'm going to publish that coming up before too long. But basically, I don't think there's going to be a huge shakeup in the SERPs. And, Matt has fast loading sites as well. And I don't think we're going to see a big uptick or a big drop from the sites that are loading slower. Sure, if you have a terrible site that's loading really slow, I think one of my friends mentioned the other day, I didn't get to talk to him yet, but he said that he was ignoring the Core Web Vitals and he actually lost, 20% of his traffic. Well, funny thing, he was using Thrive, just to throw that out there, but his sites loaded fairly slow, and he had ads and some other things and didn't do really anything to improve the site speed. And he's up against other sites like mine, or like other sites that are really well optimized and load fast. So with that said, he was clearly the worst user experience, clearly the slowest loading, and he had ads. So there's a strong argument that if you're the worst by a long margin, then you're probably going to drop down. Or if you're the very best, you may get a little tick up, but I would say it's probably not going to be as big. We'll see, right? I know the thing is, we've been talking about site speed for a pretty long time. So I think a lot of people have already taken action. Their site's loading pretty fast already. All right, any final questions here? And I just want to go back to the Georgie Cam here real quick. She's just resting there. So we're going to go out for a walk shortly. And I think, really what I can do here, I think I could do a picture-in-picture situation. Yeah, so I could be up here, and she's there, the Georgie sleeping cam. All right, it doesn't look like we have any other questions out there. So thanks for tuning in. If you do want to, I guess, connect further, you can head over to nichesiteproject.com. I share all my templates and stuff. There's actually a couple links in the show notes about site speed, so feel free to read about that stuff. A couple of those links. Shout out again to Ezoic and to ODYS, Global ODYS, and we will see you next week. Take it easy out there. Thanks everyone for tuning in.